It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Welcome to this Wednesday, November 29th edition of RealAg Radio. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and today's show is brought to you by FP Genetics. All right, we've got a great show lined up for you today. Your regular host, Sean Haney, is actually in Calgary at the Grow Canada Conference, so really looking forward to hearing how that goes and some insights that he'll bring back from that meeting. It's a really great conference. A little sad I'm not there. It's happening in Calgary, but you know what? Next year, it's here in Ottawa. So we'll see you next year there. All right. As promised, great show today. So this is brought to you by FP Genetics. We'll have Chris Churko. He's the CEO of FP Genetics. He'll join us for a product spotlight, talking about what's ahead for 2024, some exciting new cereal varieties. We've also got a clip from the Farm Safety Roundup podcast that we have. So on today's show, you're going to hear from Ryan Dick. You're going to hear about why it's just so important to prepare and plan for an emergency well ahead of it actually happening. That is just so key. I've also got, it is Wednesday, we have to talk markets. Neil Townsend of GrainFox will join me. He's going to talk grain markets and give us a very needed update on what's happening with the Black Sea region and Ukraine and Russia. I can't wait to hear an update because, of course, we're not hearing a lot in the regular news cycle right now. Then you're also going to hear from Katelyn McMurphy. She's with Saskatchewan Agriculture. There's a really cool program on outwintering cattle happening and a event coming up that she's going to tell us about. And I've also got my discussion with Kristine Tapley. She's with Ducks Unlimited Canada. They have partnered with Farm Credit Canada to top up the marginal areas payment that Ducks already does. FCC has announced it's going to top up that payment as well. Okay, so as always, lots happening today. If you've got feedback on today's show, call that RealAg listener line 1-855-776-6147. Of course, you can zip me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com, or you can zip us a DM or just talk to us on social. We're everywhere. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and I'll be back with Neil Townsend of GrainFox right after this.
Picture this. You've just taken a photo that really celebrates agriculture and your community. Why not share it with the Lalman Hometown Roots Photo Contest for a chance to support your community with $5,000. Lalman is a family-owned company that supports growers with products like Lalfix Start Spherical Pulses and Lalfix Pro Yield Liquid Soybean. Visit LalmanHometownRoots.com for more information.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing the Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this show is brought to you by FP Genetics. Now, it is Wednesday, which means, yes, of course, we need to talk markets. And so we're going to head to Winnipeg, Manitoba, and talk to Mr. Neil Townsend. He's market analyst with GrainFox. A lot of discussion on the social media feeds about what's happening in other places of the world. So let's start there. We always look to Brazil for, soybean production, corn production. There is some discussion on weather. What's the latest there?
Well, I mean, there's two parts of Brazil that are concerned. One less so. That's the southern part of Brazil, which has been excessively wet. That has consequences for their wheat crop, which has gone down in quantity and quality, so probably necessitating more imports, and also has problems for soybeans and maybe later season corn and stuff like that. But the big concern is, the big states, Mato Grosso, Goiás, and they have been, unseasonably hot and very dry. They've gotten a bit of rain here, and you've seen the market sort of vacillate depending on whether it's raining or not raining. But overall, they have very low topsoil and subsoil moisture in large parts of those states. So there's lots of question marks around soybean planting, and the soybean planting has been very slow. And then there's a lot of further question marks, not really at the center of the market yet, but people are talking about the consequences for the second crop, or safrinha corn, and there might be a significant loss of acreage there.
Right. So safrinha, that's the double crop, the second one, right?
Yeah, double crop corn. They plant that when they harvest the soybean. So the consequence of slow soybean planting is that would delay sort of the harvest and put them in potentially put the corn in a more vulnerable position. So some farmers have actually abandoned even soybeans and are planting just a single crop cotton because the prices are high, and then they don't plant corn after the cotton.
Okay.
The one thing I do want to stress about that is that all of this is unfolding during seeding. And remember, the only acre with no potential is the acre that doesn't get planted. So, there's a long window of opportunity here to plant the soybeans. And if they do get some good moisture, say in the first couple weeks of December, I mean, that crop could rebound, and become sort of even a larger crop. Now, and they were also forecast to get an all-time record. Now it's coming down, but it will still be, today's estimates are still the record, and even the lowest estimates are still either close to the top or the second all-time biggest crop.
So it's a long way from the bin, is what you're saying? A long way.
A long way from the bin, but it's enough of a story. But remember, the market's going to trade on perceptions, and right now the perception is sort of a little bit more mixed maybe than it was last week, where it was a little bit more negative about the production outcomes. But now, the forecast is very critical, and people are watching the first couple of weeks of December. And again, you can get, depending on the forecast you look at, you can get a couple different opinions, but it's definitely a weather watch, a strong weather watch there. And I think one thing you really have to be careful with is, and this goes for North America, goes for the Black Sea, goes for the European Union, goes for South America, Australia. When the weather watch happens during the planting sequence, that has probably the highest probability that, we won't even mention it when we get to the end of the crop. We'll be like, I even forgot that happened. So, I prefer my weather watches towards the end of the crop where, it's significantly damaged and people are like, this is not going to be a representative crop.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, speaking of production, of course, we are looking forward to Monday, I believe it is, StatsCan. We'll have the production figures out. Are we expecting any big changes in this report?
Well, we're definitely expecting it to be, raise the production numbers. Now, over the years, they've sort of shifted around the methodology. So this is maybe a combination of a farmer survey and the model. So, typically these December numbers, take canola, for example, it doesn't tend to go to as high as the actual canola crop eventually becomes known to be. So you have to wait a full year more to know what the canola crop was. But yes, I do expect canola to go up. So does the trade. The trade is at, 18.3, and the August Stats Canada or the September Stats Canada was at 17.4. So, almost 1 million extra tons people are expecting for canola, and, similar sort of range on wheat and spring wheat, expecting the market's expecting between 1 and 1.5 million tons of wheat to be found. So I would stress that the Stats Canada, it's something that happens. We have very few benchmarks in Western Canada or in Canada in general to follow along with. So we have to take Stats Canada, but I don't think the markets really trade on it. The markets are going to trade sort of more on the perceptions of demand and supply in, the localities and how offshore exports are going and how the crush is going and that kind of stuff.
Poor StatsCan. No one No one is really fully surprised anymore. Data is good. We need good data. It's important, but you're right. It's not necessarily usually a huge driver in markets. But we do have some happenings on the fund side for canola, for Minneapolis wheat. What's happening there?
Well, basically, the funds have put on, record shorts or near record shorts. So they're aggressively, betting against the price of both of those things. They think that, we're in a comfortable zone and that the price has, they want to make money. So they think that the price is going to go down further. Canola sort of tried to get out of sort of that, the low point, for price or the most recent low point. They rallied a little bit, but the rally didn't shake out enough of the shorts. So the shorts are still persistent and holding on. There is a risk if something changes, like the weather in South America gets, even worse, or there seems to be uptick in canola demand. I mean, you could see sort of a stampede to the other side and sort of the boat would be rocked over and, maybe we'd get a spike that, you don't necessarily deserve, but it happens just because everybody's rushing from the short side to the long side or something like that, or even to the neutral side. And the same thing for spring wheat. Spring wheat has developed, a very large short in it. And, that's one impediment to sort of seeing the price track the market. I mean, that is the market. I mean, the hedge funds are extremely important, but I mean, I wouldn't say that the spring wheat, supply and demand globally, I think it's the tightest of the wheat classes. It doesn't look like it deserves to be, overwhelmingly short, but that's where people have positioned themselves.
Okay. Now, looking sort of, I mean, we've talked production. We're talking about, where the markets are. We have to talk exports, of course. What are we seeing on the pace of Canadian exports? I know I've been seeing some numbers for different crops surprising and some maybe underwhelming. So where are we at? Let's maybe start with canola. What do we know on that front?
Well, the canola is struggling. I mean, it's 18% down from where it was last year and 33% down from the 5-year average. This is based on CGC exports. And, people have been kind of commenting that, China's not being an aggressive buyer of canola, and we probably need them to be more of an aggressive buyer. Now, there have been some rumors over the last week and a bit that maybe they've been in the market, but, we only get the actual throughput of Vancouver and the eastern ports. We don't see necessarily, we don't have an export sales report. So, yeah, it's not doing too well at this point in time. On the flip side, the crush is doing very good. I mean, we had a record October, the highest crush ever. And just by the CGC sort of domestic disappearance statistics, we're 9% above last year and 8% above the 5-year average for canola domestic usage.
I mean, hey, that sounds like a good news story, right? Aren't we supposed to do more at home?
I think that's a very good story. And if you look at the U.S. too, where they're on a record pace for soybean crush, I mean, really the underlying storyline is that renewable diesel is coming, and this biofuel is going to be something that is necessary. And maybe, we'll wake up sort of a couple of years from now and we'll realize that, we've got enough crush capacity and crush demand both here in the United States that we don't really need to export too much. And the exporters will have to pay parity to what the crushers can pay.
Mm-hmm. We shall see. We'll see. I mean, we saw this week that an airplane went, where was it? All the way across the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, on, renewable aviation fuel. What's next? Got to tell you, wouldn't be on that plane.
Well, I think that's going to be a huge, huge market because, if there's ever an industry in need of like greenwashing and supporting sort of an environmental thing, it's the aviation industry. We just had, on, I think, the day before U.S. Thanksgiving, we had the highest ever daily traffic for airplanes in the United States. I mean, and if you look at the sort of the consequence to the environment, like airplanes and airlines are pretty much number one, really, of something that, consumers directly do. And I just think, for them to kind of say all the buzzwords and have the renewable aviation fuel is probably good marketing for them. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, let's end on perhaps one of the biggest stories, but of course, geopolitics. These all influence markets and what's happening. I feel like, obviously the crisis in Israel and Gaza has taken over all of the bandwidth as far as news reporting. But what's happening in the Black Sea region do we have any indication of things getting better or worse as far as shipping goes? Because that, of course, matters to Canadian exports as well.
Oh, excellent question. And there's been actually a lot of developments. Like, first of all, very terrible weather there. They have the Black Sea is like storming. So that's really screwed up logistics. I mean, pounding even some of the export facilities have been getting big waves and hurting them, particularly in the Crimea, which is occupied by Russia, but has been actually aggressively exporting probably stolen grain from the occupied parts of Ukraine. We also have rumors that, they've been disputed, but, talk about a spot that we really don't know about is the supply and demand balance sheet for Russia. But there were rumors over the last 24 hours that the Russians are monitoring their export pace and may impose an export ban. They've already banned the export of durum, which is a strange one. They don't really export a lot of durum, but they do grow durum, and, they have exported in the past, but they banned that. But, they had a very rough finish to their spring wheat crop, both quality and quantity wise. And you can see that in part by the country just directly below them. Kazakhstan also had a very rough finish for their spring wheat crop, and they had a much smaller crop than expected. So you extrapolate that to, the new lands and in Siberia, what happened to Russia, maybe there is a bit of a crunch. So we're going to have to monitor that situation very carefully. And then likewise in Ukraine, this is sort of, political type stuff, but they're talking about some sort of scheme of how they're going to price the wheat and the exports of corn and wheat and all their stuff. And I mean, it's pretty confusing, but the end result from, analysts in that region is that this could really compromise the ability of Ukraine to have free-flowing exports and basically put the government de facto in control of it. And whenever the government's in control of something like that, I mean, you lose transparency, you lose efficiency, and you probably, the farmers get crunched, right? So that will disincentivize some of the farmers in Ukraine to put the effort that they are putting in under adverse conditions or circumstances, given the ongoing, invasion by Russia and the occupation or, the fighting happening in, lots of the regions of Ukraine and bombing of the infrastructure and stuff like that. I mean, they're already facing a lot of hardship. I mean, and then they're expected to have sort of like a tax scheme that works against them or an export scheme that works against them. That would be, very significant. So there are a lot of things happening there. I mean, in the world of agriculture, I think the Gaza-Israel conflict doesn't have that big of an impact, but I think that the ongoing Russian, invasion of Ukraine and occupation of large parts of Ukraine and the way that they're fighting the war, which is basically, burning it to the ground, is having a significant consequence still.
Huge implications for the 2024 crop. Really?
Huge. Yeah. And one of the things that's really hidden the impact of the war is just the, agronomically or whatever, the last two growing seasons in Russia and Ukraine, for that fact, have come off very, very good. But if you look at a history of that region, I mean, they can produce a lot, but they don't, there's going to be a weather circumstance one of these years, every 7 or 8 years, that, compromises a portion of the crop, right? And it, could be this year, could be next year, but I mean, you put in all of sort of the hardships that they face anyways in Ukraine, I don't know, we could see less production. And the other thing is there is a shift too in production, they're planting they're probably done planting the wheat now, but people have said that from a Ukrainian farmer perspective, the higher value crops that have some domestic processing, like sunflowers and soybeans and rapeseed, I mean, those are some of the things that they want to focus on as opposed to, having to really grow something that 100% has to get exported in its raw form.
Okay. So I'm glad we had this conversation because I really do feel like it has sort of dropped off the news cycle, and it's just, and I understand why, but realistically for Canadian producers, these are the kinds of things we need to keep on top of. So I really appreciate that, Neil. And thank you for joining me on the show today. We are going to hop now to a quick break, and I'll be back with Chris Churko of FP Genetics with today's Product Spotlight.
CDC Endure is a new oat line from Alliance Seed. High yielding with excellent disease resistance and the quality end users ask for, all in one great oat variety. CDC Endure provides the high beta-glucan levels to make heart-healthy products like breakfast cereals. For more information on CDC Endure Oats, as well as any other products from Alliance Seed, check out allianceseed.com or visit any Alliance Seed authorized retailers.
What were the issues in your fields this year? Did you do a soil sample? What is your soil sample telling you about some of the nutrient issues that you might be having going into next year? What herbicides did you use? What residues you might be concerned about? What weed issues did you have? What crop residues did you have? How well do you know your fields?
Get the answers to all the questions you have about your pulse crop at the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
To Real Ag Radio here on this Wednesday. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and joining me now for today's product spotlight is Chris Churko. He's the CEO of FP Genetics. Welcome here, Chris.
Thank you, Lyndsey. Happy to be here.
All righty. So, FP Genetics, what sets your company apart from other Western Canada seed companies?
Well, I think first it's probably what doesn't set us apart, which is obviously we are relentlessly focused on finding varieties just like everyone else. I think what sets us apart really is our people. We're a privately held company that is owned by over 170 farmers in Western Canada. It happens to be farmers that have a shared passion for new varieties, a shared passion for evaluating varieties on their farm, choosing the best genetics for their farm, and they happen to love producing seed and offering those varieties to their neighbors in their community. And so, it really is farmers working for farmers in this situation. And then our staff, our staff is all rural kids. Some are still farming. Most of our staff is kind of mid-career, and they've been involved in seed from day one. Right from our R&D group, where we are evaluating varieties on a regional level for farmers, right through to our sales team. Like I said, where half of them are still on the farm.
Now, on that note, hybrid fall rye, certainly something that FP Genetics is known for. I hear you've shifted that portfolio. Why the change?
Yeah, we have. We brought hybrid rye almost a decade ago to Canada, and it came with a promise of 20 to 30% higher yield than what growers were experiencing with the open pollinated varieties, and I think we've delivered on that. But the reality is, as you move into new varieties and new segments of crops, it's a learning curve. It's a learning curve for producers to find the management that they need to maximize production. It's a learning curve for us as well. So it was important to us not just to bring varieties to market, but to listen to farmers, listen to their successes, some of the struggles they've had, and really kind of think about what's next for that crop. So we've done a lot of investing over that time period, that 8 to 10 year time period, and feed studies, swine, beef, dairy, forage, milling, distilling, the agronomics. We start to get a picture in our head that if we want this crop to grow or to be continuously successful, there were some changes we had to make. We had to, and some conditions we had to sort of stick handle through to make sure that farmers have improved access to new and emerging markets. And so as we thought through sort of where we've been and where we're trying to go, we looked at it and said, some of the things this market needs, it needs competition. And so we're bringing that in. We've paired up with some new developers and really coming into this market with a new suite of varieties, both hybrids and open pollinated. The market is still there for open pollinated, and we're bringing some that are certainly better in terms of yield potential. And it's really just that opportunity to keep moving the bar higher for farmers, and also just improve some of the market access issues that I think we were having with just one supplier and one sort of set of rules to engage in the marketplace. So we're really excited about what we're bringing. 20 2024 or fall of 2024 will be our first opportunity to bring those out.
Now, that does, of course, bring in, looking ahead to 2024, what might be some of those very attractive cereal varieties on farmers' minds for 2024?
How's your crystal ball working on the weather?
I would love to tell you if it's going to rain, but I can't do that.
Well, I think there are a lot of good choices or new varieties for producers to take a look at. In the hard red group, AC Hockley this one's kind of it's a workhorse. It's one of those varieties that kind of has it all. Really good yield potential, excellent disease package. We've been looking at this variety now for 4 or 5 years, and right from Red River Valley in Manitoba, right up to the Peace River region, this variety has performed very consistently and very well. It's the one I'm putting on my farm this year. I don't know how much weight that carries, but it's the one that I think is going to work best for me. There's another new variety, which is AAC Hodge VB, which is a new midge-tolerant variety that was released last spring. At the time of registration, it was the highest yielding variety I'd ever seen come through the registration system. Good standability and a disease package that is almost bulletproof. It's extremely strong. Through that core midge area, western Manitoba, Highway 16 corridor through Saskatchewan and into Alberta, this has proven to be a great choice. Those two varieties, Hockley and Hodge, there's been uptake amongst our seed growers and the marketplace. Unlike anything I've seen before. I think they've both made the top 10 for acreage in the year of launch, which is not something I've seen before in the past. And then every now and again, there's a sleeper. There's one that sneaks up on you that does something you never really expected it to do, and I think that one's Manus, so I think that's one for farmers to take a look at, X-My Manus. When it came through registration, what we saw in the data and in our own trialing is that it was going to be a really good variety for southern Manitoba, Red River Valley area, extremely short, extremely strong standing, and really good yield potential. And on paper, it looked like there were some better options as we moved out of that area. But this is one of those cases where our shareholders have been right and maybe we've been wrong. It has been the top yielding variety in the Manitoba trials for the past 3 years. And as it's kind of showed that, we've moved it out of Manitoba into Saskatchewan, into Alberta, and it's performing extremely well right across the prairies. In Durham, something really exciting this year, AC Schrader is coming out. Schrader is an extremely unique variety. It has an I rating for FHB, and that may not sound really exciting to a hard red grower, but for a Durham grower, an I rating in FHB is unheard of. It is actually the only one globally that has that strong a resistance. In terms of performance of that variety, it marries up with the best of what's out there today. That's it's a testament to the breeding systems in Canada, because that's to get an I rating in Fusarium, that's good old-fashioned boots on the ground variety selections, and so it's really exciting to be bringing that one out this year. In the malt barley space, Synergy has now reached number 1 for acreage in Western Canada. Still good market acceptance, really good variety to grow. I think most people are familiar with that one at this point. There are a couple new ones coming along in Fraser and Connect that people might want to take a look at.
All right. There's a lot of exciting stuff out there and some big decisions to make for 2024. So always nice to have good options, and always great to have you on the show, Chris.
Thank you very much, Lyndsey.
All right. We'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this. When it comes to your farm, you demand performance, because what goes in determines what comes out. At Pride Seeds, we deliver on performance. With best-in-class corn hybrid seed, you'll see results when it comes to premium yield in all the ways that matter. Moisture, nutrition, dollars per acre, and of course, tonnage. So discover your farm's advantage, the Pride Seeds advantage. Visit your local dealer or prideseeds.com today.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup, weed control, field trial results, yield strategies, and so much more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF, Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest podcast today.
welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Wednesday, November 29th. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and today's show is brought to you by FP Genetics. All right, we go now to a discussion that I had with Katelyn McMurphy about outwintering cattle, some of the strategies, some of the things to think about, and an upcoming event for those in the Weyburn area who may want to check it out. And joining me now is Katelyn McMurphy. She's an agri-environmental specialist with the Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture. Welcome here, Katelyn.
Thanks very much for having me, Lyndsey.
All right, so first off, what does an agri-enviro specialist do?
Good question. So essentially the space I work in is kind of the interface between the agricultural industry and how it affects or interacts with environmental considerations. Okay. So for example, a lot of my work, and there's several of us specialists across the province, a lot of what we're doing is advising farmers and ranchers on best management practices that are both beneficial to their operation and their environment. So things like managing native grassland, managing riparian areas, improving carbon sequestration, those kinds of things.
Okay, very cool. So that brings us to part of the reason we're talking today. Heading into the thick of winter here, thinking about the cattle herd and thinking about extensive winter feeding. So there's some events coming up, and I want to touch on those and for anyone who's interested. But first, what do you mean by extensive winter feeding?
Yeah, for sure. So extensive winter feeding is a general term, Lyndsey, and what it refers to is essentially getting the cattle out of confinement, out of the corral, and out on the landscape. And what we're trying to do, the goals of extensive wintering is to improve nutrient deposition across the site. We're protecting waterways, we're paying attention to runoff control and things like that. And oftentimes, benefit to producers as well is reducing the amount of times they're starting a tractor in a winter as well.
As I like to put it, they have a forage harvester on the front and a manure spreader on the back. So let them do their thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's right. So whether that's through swath grazing, bale grazing, corn grazing, stockpiled forages, that kind of thing, that's all achieving the same goal.
All right. So now this is for some old hat. Lots of people have been doing it a long time, but for others, it would be a completely new practice for sure. And so the Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture is putting on some events to support producers who are curious about doing this and what they might consider. What are these events? How do people find information about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one we're going to start with, Lyndsey, this is the only one we have planned kind of as a pilot event, is our extensive wintering management workshop down in Weyburn. And that takes place on Tuesday, December 5th.
And now it's a whole day?
That's right. So we'll do registration at 9:30, and then we should be wrapped up by about 4 p.m.
Okay. So walk me through the topics that are going to be covered then that day. So what can someone expect from the day?
Yeah, so our goal of setting up this workshop was to, help producers, whether it's their first time setting up an extensive winter site, or maybe this is a practice they've been doing for a couple of years, but are looking to fine-tune their operations. So we're going to start with the winter site management and considerations. For, where your project's going to occur. Then we're going to talk about the actual cattle nutrition and animal welfare considerations. And then to be, try something a little different, a little bit more modern. We've gone out to several producer locations and filmed their current setup sites. So we're going to take a look at different producer sites throughout the area, and take a look at the videos and then follow it with a producer panel. Now, of course, there's always, we're always looking to draw people to our events. And one of the great ways to do that is to have an event that correlates with some of our programming that's out right now. So we do have funding available for extensive winter site projects. And so we'll be talking about that throughout the day as well.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, you had me at farm tours. So yeah. There you go. Especially from the comfort of, you can drink coffee and sit on a chair. That works too. Sounds like a great event and certainly a great way to put together, people that I'm sure are going to have lots of questions and have people there to answer them. So that's fantastic. And so for those who are interested, is it a phone number or a website? How can they sign up, for the event?
That's right. So they can call the Weyburn office directly. And so that number is 1-306-848-2857 to register for the event. Right now, our deadline is Friday, December 1st.
All right. So get at it. Okay, Katelyn, thank you. Thank you so much for this. It sounds really great. I'll be honest, I got a bit of FOMO, fear of missing out. I'd love to go. Thanks, Katelyn.
You bet.
Now we're going to hop to my discussion with Kristine Tapley. She's with Ducks Unlimited Canada, and we're going to learn about the partnership between Ducks and Farm Credit Canada on payments for some marginal land set-asides. Joining me now is Kristine Tapley. She's the National Lead for Sustainable Agriculture with Ducks Unlimited Canada. Welcome here, Kristine.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so Ducks has got some pretty exciting news. There's a new program, new partnership with Farm Credit Canada. What is it?
Yeah, so Farm Credit Canada has teamed up with Ducks Unlimited Canada to support or further support our Marginal Areas program.
So now what is the Marginal Areas program?
Okay, so the Marginal Areas program is a Ducks program where farmers can identify areas on their land base that maybe just aren't showing a return on investment. The inputs that you're putting in are not providing the yield. You're not making money in these areas. I think everybody has them. They're a saline area in the corner or a low area that's just too wet. And so if you identify those areas, you can enroll those acres in the Marginal Areas program, and Ducks will pay you an incentive to seed those down to perennial forage mix. Sometimes you can add a pollinator pack so you have some cool flowering species that will pop up in those areas, and you sign a 10-year agreement to keep those areas in perennial cover for that term. You can hay it or graze it if it's big enough, or just leave it as a pollinator strip on the edge of the field. And what's exciting right now, the news today, is that FCC is going to further support that program. So folks that are enrolled in the Marginal Areas program and who are also FCC clients can sign up with FCC to receive an additional annual payment for as long as the FCC program exists.
Okay, so kind of neat. Further incentive for an existing program. Why is this important for Ducks Unlimited, this MAP program?
Yeah, this is an exciting program for us because we think it's a really great fit for grain producers. We think it makes a lot of business sense to, identify areas that are already not producing on the landscape. By just taking those areas out of production, you're already making more money per acre. But by putting them into a perennial cover, there's lots of other benefits. So it's not going to be a weed patch anymore. It'll provide extra pollinator services, and it provides habitat and biodiversity. So there's lots of really cool benefits that come along with it. And it's a pretty new program for us, so we're excited the FCC has jumped on board to help us get the word out and hopefully gain interest in the program.
Now, you did mention you can hay these areas or graze these areas, so there is some latitude there to potentially make use. But as you mentioned, pollinator habitat is good. Just keeping out those pesky weeds in those saline areas is also very good. That's a huge one, I think, for sure. Is there a acreage goal with ducks? Is there a sort of, we want to get to this many acres, or is it sort of wide open and you've capped it as how much you're willing to put aside for an incentive?
Yeah, so these are typically smaller acres within the field because it's within a cropping field. We have other programs that focus on establishing forage. So if you're looking at field scale conversion to perennial cover, there's other program options for that. But for this particular program, the Marginal Areas program, to max out the kind of benefit from the FCC and ducks combined, you're looking at 40 acres. So it's a $50 an acre up to $2,000 annually, but it also depends on how much lending you have with FCC. So that's really the sweet spot on the duck side, is to get 40 acres, and it doesn't have to be in one clump. can be a few acres here, a few acres there. And if you're not at that 40 acres, you still get a portion of the payment.
Okay, very cool. All right. And so, of course, for those who are interested, if this, piques their interest, where can they go for more information?
Yeah, you bet. So you can contact your local Ducks office or go to ag.ducks.ca or to the FCC website under their Sustainability Incentive Program.
Kristine, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and I will be back just after this. We're going to dive in to how to prepare for emergencies on the farm and the importance of doing that right after this.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other Real Ag personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this show is brought to you by FP Genetics. Now, for this final segment of the day, I've pulled most of the latest Farm Safety Roundup that just went up on our YouTube channel, our podcast feed, and of course at RealAgriculture.com. Now, the Farm Safety Roundup, it's a new podcast series we've got, and today we've got Ryan Dick. He's with Workplace Health and Safety, and he's going to share some of the things that you maybe don't think about in preparing for emergencies. And yes, preparing. Let's get proactive on farm safety. So here it is, Sean Haney's discussion on the Farm Safety Roundup.
So let's bring him in. It is Ryan Dick. Hey, Ryan, how's it going?
Not too bad, John. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it is great to chat with you here today. So Ryan, how do you assess the risks on your farm or another farm that you're working with?
One of the first things you have to do is do a walk around, actually, take a good look at all those places on the farm, examine the field entrances, your farm entrances, examine the barn itself. You need to understand how your surrounding environment plays a factor into that as well. We've had a lot more forest fires and other seasonal weather changes over the last few years that have really taken a lot of us by surprise. So understanding those changing weather patterns in your area are also a key importance on assessing those risks on the farm. You've got to make sure that you're minimizing those risks in the barn. Especially for the winter, you want to keep things clear, snow accumulation. You want to watch out for your heat lamps. Ammonia buildup in barns is pretty important as well. You need to be aware of that happening, make sure the proper ventilation is there. Essentially, you need to be looking at what are you going to do in case of an emergency. You don't want to leave that to the chances of it happening and then trying to figure out what you want to be doing. You want to have a good plan in place as far as assessing what you're going to do if a barn fire happens.
Yeah. And I was just going to mention to you, like, the part of that proactive part that I was talking about is having that tillage equipment kind of still hooked up around the barn in case there is some sort of fire, right?
That has, in our neck of the woods, that has proven very effective a couple of times. I unfortunately had a situation on my farm this past year, and it was because the neighbors have tillage equipment hooked on at all times that they were actually able to come out and deal with the situation that arose in our field. If you don't have something hooked up, no matter how accessible it is, it's still going to take you a good 20 minutes, half hour to get that tractor fired up, hooked onto the equipment, and then out. And in a half hour, a barn fire or a field fire can spread extremely far.
Oh, man. Okay, so let's talk about identifying some of the hazard gaps on the farm to reduce the potential impact here if something goes wrong.
Well, one of the biggest things that needs to be assessed is your civic address. Is it visible? Is it clear? Will people be able to see it from the roadway, or is it covered by brush? Did maybe the cultivator hit that last time it was coming in? Can first responders get in? Do they know where the location is? One of the biggest problems that we've seen is that first responders, they will go to the civic address number. And if that civic address number is at the driveway, but the issue is in the back 40 or is in the barn around the back of the farm, those first responders are going to waste precious minutes at the house trying to find somebody. So it's very important to have that plan in place, have someone meet those first responders at the end of the road and direct them to exactly where they need to go.
You know, Ryan, you mentioned the local fire department, them being trained. I've heard of some farms, even on top of that, taking some members of the local fire department on a tour of the farm.
And that is a great idea, Sean. And if you haven't had the fire department on site, I definitely urge you to reach out and contact them. One of the greatest things is having the fire chief or those first responders familiar with your farm. There's a lot of hazards they need to be aware of: pesticide storage, fuel storage, where water lines are, where the power access points are. All very important for them to know. And if they're showing up at 3 o'clock in the morning and everything is pitch black and there's no power, it's extremely difficult for them to figure out where they need to be going to serve you best. Have them on farm during the day. Give them a tour. Consider doing it multiple times in the year. Our local fire chief has been great at that, and has practiced several of the farmers do on a regular basis, especially in the spring and the fall if they are storing excessive chemicals and products over the course of the season.
So when it comes to having an emergency plan, what does that actually look like? Because it just shouldn't be like, you know, call the fire department. That's way oversimplistic here. That's obviously a component of it. But what is in an emergency plan for a farm?
Well, an emergency farm, you're going to want to have roles well defined. You're going to want to know those emergency numbers beyond just the standard 911. Have numbers for your local neighbors easily accessible. They're the first ones to be able to respond to give you a hand. Know where all your employees are and who has what skills. Know what animals are on site and have that posted somewhere. It's very important for first responders to know what kind of situation they're getting into, especially if you're not on site. If you are away for the weekend and the neighbor calls in the fire for you, you won't be there to help that fire department assess those risks and to give them the peace of mind as far as what has to be removed or who is around. The other thing is very important is, as I said, assign responsibilities and roles. If there is a situation on our farm, we have the plan that I will attend the situation, where my wife will attend the roadside. She will wait at the roadside for the paramedics or the first aid responders and escort them directly to where they need to go. Very important to have those lanes mapped out. It's difficult for a fire engine to get to your barn if their axles are wrapped in electric wire trying to get into the field entrance. You also want to know how many animals are on site and where they're located, as well as where they're going to be moved to in case they do have to leave the barn. Do you have somebody that's going to handle those animals? Because if the barn's on fire and the animals are panicking, it's very unlikely that they'll leave on their own, despite the levels of dangers that are there. If it's after dark, an animal will not move from a light area to a dark area willingly. And if you have people that are unfamiliar with handling those animals, doing what most people I've seen do and run around and scream and wave their arms and try to startle the animals, that's going to create an uncontrolled panic. And the last thing you want is to have first aid responders being stampeded by a herd of cattle.
Now, Ryan, a part of that response plan is going through, you know, no different when we're in school. Remember we did the fire drill? we do the practice. So what should we do there for ourselves, you know, our family and the workers on the farm, and from a training perspective, once again, trying to be proactive?
Well, it's great to bring up because it's very important to be proactive in these situations. Just because we think we know what we're going to do in this situation doesn't mean we're going to remember when that situation occurs. So doing dry runs, having written documentation, one of the best things for all the employees and every member on the farm is to have a written evacuation and emergency plan in all of their vehicles. So keep a personalized copy in everyone's vehicle. That way, regardless of whether they're on site or having to be called onto site, there is a well-defined list of the steps that need to be taken. of where everybody has to go and whose responsibility is going to be what. You don't want everybody showing up to do the exact same thing and leaving 4 other things off that list untouched. And practice those dry runs for different times of the season. The layout and how things are in the summer are very different than how things are going to be in the winter. If everybody thinks everything is accessible and no one has plowed the driveways, having to wait that hour or two to get the driveway opened up to allow the fire truck back is just going to be toasting marshmallows at that point in time rather than actually putting out a fire. It's also very important that somebody on site has first aid training and is kept up to date. Despite how close you are, and making that phone call as well, have the person understand what information needs to be communicated. It's very easy to say there's a fire, I need help, but it's another story altogether to say there's a fire in our chemical storage area. We have pesticides on site and fumes. That's a vast difference between the equipment the fire departments have to show up with. Also, have things clearly marked on site for everybody to know where the fire extinguishers are, when the last time they were checked, where the first aid kits are as well, who's going to move all the vehicles away from the barns. So the advanced training for the workers is extremely important. Do those dry runs. Make sure everybody's familiar with their roles.
Yeah, Ryan, the fire extinguisher one, cannot encourage people enough to make sure you're checking those, because the worst thing that could happen, or there's a lot of bad stuff that can happen here, but one of the worst things that could happen is you see that fire extinguisher on the wall, you assume it works, and then you find out when you really do need it, when at that point in time that where I really got to pull it off the wall and I got to use it, it doesn't work because it's expired, it's faulty, it's been there since 1975. That is going to be a real unfortunate issue for you.
And unfortunately, it's one that we've encountered many times, especially for the fire extinguishers that we keep in tractors. We oftentimes forget to check on those.
Yeah.
So it's very important. Check those fire extinguishers on a yearly basis for sure. You can always take them to the local fire department to be tested. The last thing you want to do is pull the pin to test it yourselves. That is going to adjust the fire extinguisher. You're going to need to get that fixed up. The very important factor of the fire extinguishers is to make sure you have the right type. An AB extinguisher near the shop is not going to do any good if it's an electrical fire. You need to make sure you have the right fire extinguisher on hand. Most fire departments, you can take your fire extinguishers down there to be tested and checked on. And if it's been sitting there, as you said, for the last several years, chances are it's not going to work properly. And the last thing you want to be doing is standing in the middle of the barn fire thinking you've got things under control to pull that trigger and just have a little bit come out. You also need large enough ones. Know and understand how large a cubic area a fire extinguisher will affect.
All right, I'm going to leave it there. If you want to hear the full interview, head on over to realagriculture.com or head on over to our YouTube page. You can see the entire podcast there, or of course download wherever you get your podcasts. Definitely some key things to think about there. So thank you to Ryan Dick with Workplace Health and Safety for sharing that. That does it for today's show. I will be back on the issues panel on Friday. As always, if you've got feedback, give us a call, 1-855-776-6147, or find us across social media at Real Agriculture. You can drop us a DM, ask some questions there of our social media feed, and we'll get back to you. As many people have done this past week, so I really appreciate the feedback, the questions. We'll be following up with those as well. All right. It is Farmer Rapid Fire tomorrow, so come on back, 4:30 Eastern here on Rural Radio, channel 147. Sean will be back in the driver's seat, and we'll take a listen to what farmers are up to this week on tomorrow's show. Cheers, everybody.